Depression, our policymakers, our politicians have traded depth for duration. In the 1920-21 recession, first of all, who was president in 1920-21? Harding. Nice, Warren G. Harding. And then he died, and then who replaced him? Coolidge. Excellent, okay. And then who? Hoover, and Hoover was just terrible. Yeah, Republican. Hoover. Anyway, so what happened in the 1920-21 recession? We went down deeper than the 1929 drop. The 1920-21 recession was deeper than the initial drop of the Great Depression. But how many of you have even heard of the 1920-21 recession? Right? No one, or very few. Right? Why? Because we were out of it so quickly. It was a V shape. What did government do? Very little. In fact, they shrank the size of government. They cut taxes, cut spending, shrank the size of government. When we trade depth for duration, right? So they try to knock off the bottom. They try to stop companies from going under and prop them up as best they can. Fine. But think about what you're doing. If you lose your job in a deep V, but you're out in 9 months or out in a year, what does that mean? It means you've lost your job, and now you've got to dig into your savings. Can you survive for 9 months? I mean, a little bit of help here, a little bit of help there, sure. But look at today. We have 8% unemployment, over 8%. In North Carolina, it's over 9%. In some areas, like in Mount Olive area, it's like 10%. Almost. What does that mean? Imagine you've lost your job in 2008. It's been 4 years. What happened to your skill sets? They atrophy. You deplete your savings. You get wiped out. Now what? Now you're utterly dependent. If it's a sharp, short V, you can ride through that and come out on the other side. But what have we done? We've cut off the depth, sure. But the people who've lost their job, it's duration, and it's just destroying them. Now, suppose we get out of the recession, we get back to that point right before we crashed, and you say, no blood, no foul, right? No! Recessions cause real pain to real people. And not only have we wasted resources, and you can see these, I mean, I drive through several towns, and you look at these strip malls, and some of these buildings, you just look right through them, because there's nothing there. And some of these resources get thrown away. But we've also wasted a resource that we can never recover. And what's that? That's time. We've wasted time. So how do we get out? How do we get out of a recession, right? We need to liquidate the malinvestments. The bad investments that have been built up during the artificial boom need to be liquidated. What does that mean? That means going through the proper sequence of bankruptcy. So what does that mean? That means companies have sold off ownership, that's equity, shares to owners. And so you have your common stockholders, you have your preferred stockholders, but then you have your creditors. You've borrowed money. You've sold bonds, borrowed money. You owe them money. You've bought steel, you still have to pay these people. You have hired people, their labor, you still have to pay these people, right? So you have creditors. So how do you get the money to pay off all of these people? Well, you have a fire sale. Right? You sell your equipment, you sell the building, you sell your inventory, and then from that money, you work down that list. And if there's any money left over at the very bottom, then the common shareholders get a smidge, get a bit. Well, let's take a look at General Motors. What if General Motors was actually allowed to go bankrupt? And I mean truly bankrupt, like no more General Motors. What if they were allowed to do that, not bailed out? What would happen? Well, let's look at some other things, like Cadillac. Is there value in the name Cadillac? Yeah. What about the cars? Yeah, absolutely. Corvette, right? Is there value in Corvettes? Yeah. Do you think anyone would want to buy Cadillac or Corvette if they went, had to go through this sale, this fire sale? You think anyone wanted to buy that? You think Nissan might be interested, Kia, any of these guys? Yeah, most likely. And when these guys decide to buy, say, Cadillac, would they have to pay top dollar for it? Pay full price? No, of course not. Right? It's a fire sale. They get it for a song. Pennies on the dollar. So what does that mean? That means the people who buy Cadillac can produce the very same car, sell the very same car for the very same price, but now they have a lower cost structure. Because they have a lower cost structure, they're able to make a profit when GM could not. They were incurring a loss. This is how you convert malinvested capital into properly structured capital. You have to go to the dentist. You have to go through this process. It's painful, it sucks, but the more we dilly-dally, the more it's going to worsen. And so can we have real recovery? Yes, we can. How? Normal growth through Say's law. What does that mean? It means that savings is the key, right? What is Say's law? Savings leads to investment, which leads to capital accumulation, higher levels of productivity, more stuff, higher living standard. What starts it all? Savings. We need more savings. What else? Well, can government get out of the way? Yes, it can. Like what? Well, first of all, don't reinflate. Don't have more sugary sodas. Don't go to the caffeine. The more you do this, what does it do? It just kicks the can down the road. It's like 2 in the morning and you're doing this. What's next? Don't fiddle with the interest rate. What is the interest rate? It's a price. When we look at prices, right, just pick something normal, right? Price of shoes. What should the price of shoes be? Do you know what the price of shoes should be? No. No one can answer that. Why? Because it's the interaction of supply and demand. And who supplies and who's demand? All of us. The price of shoes is dependent upon the interactions of all of us. So why is it that when it comes to this signal that ties the present and the future together, we don't trust the market. We don't trust us. Instead, what do? We try to have people set the price. Right? Look at the Soviet Union and how well they set the price for shoes. Comrade, what should the price of shoes be today? I don't know, comrade. Let's make it 20 rubles. Oh, this is very good. Right? What is that? Is that a real price? No, that's just made up. Interest rates. What is it? It's a price. And yet if we just gussy it up with the board of governors, right? Oh, well, the chairman of the Fed, well, he knows. Why? What? He's not smarter in some sort of supernatural way that he knows what our time preference, our collective time preference is? Or because there are multiple interest rates, time preferences are? There's no way. And yet we set the interest rate in the same way that the Soviet Politburo and others were setting prices. How ridiculous. What else? Don't raise income taxes. Why? Because that destroys savings. If you're trying to feed your family, if you're trying to pay rent, if you're trying to make car payments, and now all of a sudden you raise taxes, what happens to savings? Gone. And if we look at the magic formula, can we consume our way to prosperity? No. That's why we go to work, right? Consumption is the consequence of our work. That's why we do this. So if we can't consume our way to prosperity, then no more stimulus. No more stimulus directed at consumption. And I don't care if it's Obama trying to build roads and such, or if it's Bush who says, here's $600, go spend it on a flat screen TV. No, 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 no. No, no, no. Wrong, 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 wrong with wrong sauce. That's how wrong it is. What can we do? Well, we can make rules that allow bankruptcies and mergers to be simpler and faster. And so we can go through that liquidation process faster. We can reduce taxes on savings. Now, who are the savers? Who are the savers? I mean, if you're a family of 4 and you're making $20,000 a year, how much are you saving? Not much. If you are a family of 4 and you're making $200,000 a year, who are the savers? It's not the guys making $20,000. Oh no, does that just mean tax cuts for the rich? But you can't say that! Sure you can. It also includes retained earnings, okay? What's that? That's corporations. What? Cut taxes on corporations? Yes. Because, you know, corporations aren't real. Did you know this? They're not real people. General Motors, not a real general. Who knew? So what's a corporation? It's just a collection of individuals working together to produce profit. And how do we do that? We have to make stuff that people want. We have to convince them to voluntarily give up their dollars to trade for what we've made. That's what a corporation is. That's its only purpose, is to make profit. And that's a wonderful thing. And so when we tax a corporation, the incidence of the tax, the burden of the tax, doesn't fall on this mythical corporation because they don't exist. It falls on the owners, it falls on the workers, and it falls on the consumer. On what ratio? We don't know. It's all hidden. Eliminate the veil. Get rid of it. Imagine we dropped income tax on corporations to 0. You want to stimulate the economy? Do that. If you're a businessman in Europe and you saw the United States drop their income tax on corporations to 0, how would you react? And we can also reduce business costs by what? By reducing rules and regulations on them, by reducing taxes on them. And we also need to recognize this. Losses are necessary. Losses are necessary to free up resources and malinvested capital. Bailouts prevent this. Bailouts are really bad. Why? Because if I screw up and then I get bailed out, right? Then I don't have to worry about screwing up. You see, screwing up going on in business, that's a big fear. Fear is a motivator. Fear is an incentive. And fear checks greed. Fear checks greed. You look at the Wall Street guys, oh, those guys are so greedy. What checks them? What keeps them in check? Fear of bankruptcy keeps them in check. You remove the fear of bankruptcy, what's checking greed? Nothing. And government officials, what are their incentives? Well, their incentives is to prevent big bad headlines. So their actions prolong and deepen the recession. We want a V-shaped recession. What do they give us? I don't know, some sort of misshapen check mark or something. And so what do we look at? We look at Obama's plan. What's his analysis? Well, they say the left says that greed caused the latest recession. It's ridiculous. Greed's always there. It's like saying that gravity caused the airplane to crash. What? Are you eating? Oh, thanks, Jesus. Will tax and spend, stimulus help us? We've already seen that consumption, we cannot consume our way to prosperity. So will future government intervention like bailouts help us or harm us? If we take a look at government, now we look at Frank Dodd, what is that? That's basically government take over the banking industry. Increasing rules and regulations, is that going to solve the problem? A lot of people said, oh, you know, we've had so much deregulation. Ha! Between 1980 and 2009, okay, 1980 to 2009, for every one deregulation policy in banking, you had 4 regulation policies. 4 to 1. And they're looking at, oh, we've deregulated so much. Ha! How about TARP, right? The Troubled Asset Relief Program, where we basically gave $700 billion to the banks. Did that do any good? Did that solve it? No. The Fed actually told us last year in November that they were going to back up the banking industry. By how much did they pledge? Take that $700 billion. I mean, that number was so big that political campaigns for the presidency stopped, and they had to go back to the Senate and vote on it, right? That's how big the $700 billion was. The Fed decided that they would backstop the banks by how much? Another 7, match them? No. Take that number, multiply it by 11. That's over $7.7 trillion. At that time, GDP wasn't even $14 trillion. It was over half the size of the economy. And now where does the Fed get this money? Well, what is the dollar backed by today? Is it backed by gold? Silver? Was it backed by the full faith and credit of the United States? What the heck is that? It's nothing. That's what it is. It's backed by nothing. And where do dollars come from? Well, they print it. No, they don't print it. Just type it on a computer. Done. Right? You go to the Fed, you sell at a table for $100, they write you a check, you take your check to your bank gives you $100, your bank then goes to the Fed and says, give us a credit for $100, they type it on their computer, done. Where'd it come from? It came from a big black hole of nothingness. Just created it, boom, there it is, $100. But it's not $100 for a table. It's what? They're buying debt. Right? We had quantitative easing 1, quantitative easing 2, quantitative easing 3, now quantitative easing infinity. They're going to be buying up debt at $40 billion a month until they change their mind. They might up it to $50 billion or $60 billion or $100 billion. And this will go on for how long? Until they say, we're done. Remember that non-neutral effect? The people get the money first win? Is there any incentive for them not to do this? And so what do we really need? What we need is savings. Not consumption, not stimulus. What do we need? We have had too much regulation. We have had too much intervention. We have too many things distorting these very precious market signals. What do we need? We need sound money, not future inflation. We need a sound banking system. Hayek said it's like holding a tiger by the tail. Right? You have the tiger by the tail, and what does he do? He starts running. As he starts running, he goes faster and faster. And as he goes faster and faster, you start bouncing harder and harder, and it's tearing you up. But if you let go of the tail of the tiger, what happens? He eats you. Yeah, that's not good. You want to grab the tail, the tiger's tail again, go for another ride? Because that's what they're planning on doing. That's what they've announced they're doing. You see, we can be confident because we're right. The Austrian theory has proven itself from the 1920s until today. No other theory has this track record. And even though you have politicians supporting Keynesian theories, why? Because they say tax and spend. Of course they're going to like that. But let me ask you this. When it comes down to things like being an activist, being a radical, which is more radical? Trusting people to run their own lives as they best see fit? Or controlling them through the mechanisms of the state? Which is more radical? I mean, if you think about the people who are fighting in this upcoming presidential election, which is the more radical side? The side that says, I'm going to let people chart their own course. I'm going to put my faith in individuals that I don't know. Or those that say, you know, we can't have people drinking sodas in sizes like that, because that's just too big. We know better. Which is more radical? So I'm very happy to be here to serve the Students for a Better Tomorrow because we know the answer. We've known the answer for a long time. And the answer is sound money, free markets, private property, and freedom of individuals to be authors of their own lives. Because that has been a unique thing. If we look at the last 5,000 years of recorded human history, what do we see? We see that most people do not are not authors of their own lives. They have to live their lives for someone else, to someone else's whims and caprices. It's only in these last couple hundred years that we see that people are free to chart their own destiny. Not everywhere, just in a very limited area. And that they're protected from the state by private property. And there's a line that says, this is mine, you cannot cross. And because of that, we have built a standard of living that we have never seen ever before. It's absolutely amazing what just a little bit of private property and freedom can do. So I'm very confident about the future. I'm very confident because we know what the solution is. And it's people like yourselves that, well, have to make it happen. I'll finish on this last note here. My son was just yesterday I was putting something in the pantry and I asked him a question. I said, Stephen, answer me. He's 6, right? I said, just answer me. Stephen, answer me. He's in 1st grade, right? And I said, Stephen, didn't you hear me? And he said, yeah. I'm like, why didn't you answer me? He said, I was nodding. I said, well, I can't hear you when you nod. He says, well, my 1st grade teacher told me that actions speak louder than words. Smart aleck kid. I'm so doomed coming up. But he's right. We can say these words. These are nice, fine words. But now we have to translate this into action. Okay? And now is the time. Okay, so we have some time for questions and answers. I don't know if we want to do this here. What's your thoughts here, Andrew or Marcus? Or
yeah,
it's up to you guys.
Yeah.
I'm at your disposal.
Okay. Let's take a few minutes.
I was wondering if you could just briefly touch on the idea of wage stagnation for middle class. This is a big issue I find coming up amongst the Occupy Wall Street camp, and the idea that wages have remained flat for middle class or lower income workers, and just some perspective on that.
Okay. When we look at this sort of data, first of all, it's not per capita. When we look at this data, it's in household numbers. And household numbers can be massaged, manipulated into, say, various things. For example, imagine you have a family and the father is making $100,000, okay? The child is making $20,000, and so the total income of the household is what? It's $120,000, okay? Now, imagine that the child gets a raise, right? Gets a new job, and now he's making $35,000 and moves out of the house. Is this a good or a bad thing? It's wonderful. Yay, get out. Right? So, out goes the kid. But when we compile the data, right, the average in scenario 1 was $120,000. Now, what do we have? I've got $100,000 plus $35,000 for 2 households, so now what do? We divide that in half. What happened to household income? It's gone down, right? But has the situation gotten worse? Well, no, it hasn't. So that's the first thing we have to worry about is the manipulation of the data. How is the data treated? But more importantly, it's this. You look at the mobility of people in the different classes. You see that the people who are rich, I mean the people who the left call robber barons, right? Your Carnegies, your Vanderbilts, your J.P. Morgan, they all started poor. In fact, if we look at it, who makes a better entrepreneur? A rich guy or a poor guy? Someone born into wealth or someone born into poverty? And it's the poor kid. Why? Because they know what poverty is. They're used to ambiguity. They are used to taking risks. Someone born into wealth is playing it safe. Not always, but that's what we tend to see happen. We see better entrepreneurs rising up, and we see this dynamic which is lost in those sorts of numbers. And finally, when we talk about classes, right, let's just look at Marxism. You've got the aristocracy, and that was overthrown, the monarchy was overthrown by the bourgeoisie. And then underneath the bourgeoisie, we have the proletariat. But what is the proletariat? What is the bourgeoisie? Well, these are names given to groups of people by the social scientist, right? Social scientist. And what does that mean? That means it's arbitrary. These are arbitrary divisions of people. And to say that there are people who have class interests is a huge, heroic assumption. Because you could have a person who is part of the bourgeoisie and a Presbyterian, and someone who is part of the proletariat and a Presbyterian, and these two guys have more in common with each other than anyone else in their socioeconomic classification. Okay? So these groups that people tend to put people in, oh, the socioeconomic groups, right? That's just an arbitrary definition. Okay? So let's not get all bound up into this sort of debate, because it tends to be fruitless. Other questions? I won't be as long with my answer, I promise. I've explained everything perfectly. Nice. Yes.
When you were talking about the falls that come down sharply, what exactly is that you're talking
I'm sorry, what?
Like when you say...
The which part coming down sharply?
Like the 1920-21 recession, you said there was a sharp fall of what? GDP? Or...
Yes, but it's more than GDP, but it was basically the entire economy. We see the consumption falls, we see investment falls, we see the early industries fall. I mean, it's just a general contraction of the economy, right? And the question is which would we prefer? Do we want a sharp V, or do we want some sort of weird misshapen check mark or something? I tried to say hockey stick, but then it would be backwards, so, you know, being all Al Gore-like. I don't think I could be as boring as Al Gore, though. You ever see his movie? It's terrible. I mean, there's this part where he's there, and they've got the two lines. He goes, oh, look at that, they look alike, right? And then they have this big close-up on him, and it's a time series, right? And so the data does this. It goes up, down, up, and then it does this. It goes, right? Did you see? Time series cannot go backwards in time. It is behind his head in the movie. I mean, that doesn't tell you something.
Can I ask, do you, without going into specifics of current politics or anything like that, how long do you think it'll be before we bail ourselves out of this? I know that's asking you about a million variables simultaneously. But.
Okay, well, let's explain the hole that we're in. How big's the economy? Slightly north of $15 trillion. Okay, $15 trillion. Okay, what is the size of the national debt? Okay, so when we spend money and then we take in money from taxes and such, we spend more than what we take in. That's called a deficit. And then when we add up all the deficits, how big is it? It's north of $16 trillion. Okay, so we've got a debt to GDP ratio of about 104, 105%. So in other words, if we basically took an entire year and worked just to pay off the national debt, not eat a single thing, right, for the entire year, we would almost pay it off. Okay, so that's how we are. And you're thinking, well, you know, it could be worse. No, it is actually worse. You see, that's not the scary number. There's another number that's more scary, and that number is this. It's called unfunded U.S. liabilities. The what? That is that the U.S. government has made some promises. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all these other things. And how much money do we need, extra money, do we need right now sitting in a bank collecting interest to meet all of these promises that we've made? We have a hole of $120 trillion. Actually, it's north of that. $120 trillion. Okay, the size of our government, the size of our economy is 15. Okay, do you see okay, this is the size and scope of the problem. Now, if you look at the top 6 things that we're spending on, what's number 1? Medicare, Medicaid, that's number 1. Then what? Social Security. Then what? Defense, all of Department of Defense, that includes Afghanistan, all of it. Then what? Welfare. Then what? Then 5 and 6 we've got interest on the debt and pensions to government employees, federal government employees. Okay? Now, of those 6 things, which of them are non-discretionary and which of these are discretionary? And I'll give you a hint. Only one is labeled as discretionary. That means, you know, maybe we need it, maybe we don't. And of the 6, which one is it? It's defense. Defense. Yep, that's the discretionary one. Maybe we need the military. Maybe not. All the rest, non-discretionary. Now, of course, that's disingenuous because Congress could change it at any time, right? They could just pass a law and get rid of it wholesale if they wanted. But if we look at Social Security, just as an example, what do we see? Well, we could just print money and get out of it, right? No, because Social Security payments are indexed to inflation. Well, we could just grow our way out of it, right? No, we can't grow our way out of it because it's indexed to growth, too. Okay, how do we fix that? I don't know. We have to change the structure of Social Security because people your age, you're getting a negative rate of return for your dollars that you put in. Okay? You're getting a negative rate of return. Okay, so you put in $1, you get less than $1 out. Just so you know. That's your grandparents sticking it to you. Good times. Okay, so how do we get out of it? Well, we could print more money. In fact, we could pay off the entire national debt tomorrow if we wanted. All $16 trillion. Why? Because money comes from a big black hole of nothingness. We could create infinite dollars. Do it tomorrow. The only problem is we'll have a slight inflationary problem if we did this. Slight. So, I'd like some Starbucks, please. Okay, that'll be $150. Nice. Good times. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, it is completely messed up. I said messed up, that's right. Camera. What's going on? I'm employed. But really messed up. So how do we fix it? Well, we're going to have someone with guts, that's the word I can use on camera, guts, to basically say, the promises we've made, we can't keep them. Because we can't. Something's got to give. It cannot go this way. It cannot continue. They talk about how Social Security, well, it'll have enough money until blah, blah, blah. No, it's broke now. You see, the money going in and the money coming out exceeds the money going in. Well, how do they cover the deficit? Well, they have these little pieces of paper called IOUs. And where are they cashing that in from? From the general fund. Where does the general fund get its money from? It gets it from you, too, right? So they're taxing you through FICA, they're taxing you through the general fund. So, they're taxing you out of both your pockets. Good times. How do we fix that? Well, you're going to have to really shake up the system. Because you are really getting the short end of the stick. My parents, thank you. On behalf of my parents, thank you. I'm not doing much better. I'm sort of breaking even. You guys, not even breaking even. Thanks. And now we're not. And now we've got medical care. Oh yay! What happens when you get something for free? Do you just only take what you need if you get it for free? Is that how that works? You only take just what you need. No, of course not. So how do you ration a scarce resource if not by price? Well, this is what these panels are all about, right? And now they're saying next year they're going to switch how we're going to allocate kidneys. Kidneys are going to go to people who are the youngest. Hey, so score for you guys, yay! Not based on who's about to die or who's sickest or who's on the waiting list longest. No. Who's youngest? Okay. It's arbitrary, so that's the point. All right. Well, I know that you guys want to go see a debate. I know that you guys want to, write this up because you have a 12-page paper that's due tomorrow at 8 a.m. But I really appreciate coming out here. I appreciate your attentiveness. Thank you very much.